Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Buriarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for smarter buildings. So it's really great to have you guys with us today. In case you're wondering who we are listed on mondaylive.org with links to our profiles. And just remember that the discussions here in this hour are personal, views are personal, not of any company or organization. Keep that in mind. And let's make this as interactive as possible, especially today. We're a bit light on the panel here, so we want to talk about stuff that's been going on over the past year. So we're open to anybody wanting to come and join us, as long as they behave themselves.
That's
This
gonna
being,
be that's gonna be a stretch with this.
Yeah, that's right. Define behave.
yeah, so we are talking about OEM disruption through the month of June. Which this is the last, and we're going to be talking about just wrapping up the year today. Looking forward to that. But before that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken for his normal update from automated buildings. Ken, what's going on?
As always, lots. Right up there in the top left-hand corner, we're being media sponsor of a lot of events. The first one is the Future of the Built Environment in Singapore. Next one is building off of INBAC, which is India BACnet, when that's in November in Mumbai. Can't even say that. Anyway, and then also we're supporting the smart buildings in London. So as you can see, we're getting fairly global and getting out to a whole bunch of people. We also are a media sponsor of the Kubernetes in Atlanta. So we're trying to get your message to a whole bunch of new people, and it seems to be working. We have the summary of last week, the OEM disruption when smart equipment challenges traditional building automation. I think that was good, and I think AI did a reasonable job of doing a summation of what that was all about. We got another post that you're closer to the edge than you think, and this is an interesting article. It's come out of from Mike, who's with I'm not never sure how you say that, Naya or something. Basically they're a data company that is part of Carrier, and what they're seeing is as more and more of the devices are taking their data out and using AI at the edge, it's changing their whole business, which was everything was going back to sort of server farms and stuff like that. And I think what they're showing is the person standing on a cliff, and what he's looking at is a sea of computerized devices. And they point out that with the power of that comes more than a little bit of problems trying to manage all of that. And it's an interesting read, I think. And then the one below that is actually one of our advertisers, but I think it's a trend that's going to happen is they've got their CubeBot AI agent, and what they're using their agent for is startup commissioning and maintenance. And I think that's a pretty good use for a AI agent, but I think it's just the first of many. We're going to start seeing people are going to come up with their AI agent once they figure out the way this is going to work. It's that's what we're going to be buying the services of, or using their services. It's interesting how they're going to market that, whether they're going to charge you by the hour for that agent, or whether they're going to provide it as a free service to get you to come to use their other services. So that's an interesting twist as well. One of the things we're going to talk about today is the IBB ecosystem overview, and I've just provided a link to that. And of course, Anto just provided a sort of a full report on that in his email to us all. And I think there's some good data there. We've all kind of been poking at it. We've all been talking about it, but I think it's now time to take it and share it with the larger audience that we're trying to pull together with automated buildings. In doing that, I also threw in the month, since I call this thing Summer Summary, is the name of my slide. Down at the bottom, I've got the month of May, which we did when we took the last holiday off. We did a summary of down there at the bottom, the month of May, Monday Live. So you can click on that and it gives you access to everything that we've sort of done to date. And then the bottom one is an interesting one, is we're working on with 2525, we're working to try and get the specifications and some of that. And I found this interesting, is this is one of our sponsors as well, and they basically have done a specification for how to bring in various pieces, and I think it's an interesting resource. And what dawns on me is there's probably a whole bunch of people that are working simultaneously writing specifications. I know our company, SES Consulting, it has a lot of online specs, and what they do a lot is once we write something, they say, yeah, those are good words. They actually put them in their words, and there's probably a big opportunity for something like AI to go through and start to pull together all of these specifications that are online and start to, maybe take the best of the best out. Anyway, those are some of my ideas for now, and back to you, Anto.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Again, as always, a lot going on. Link board as normal. Any other thoughts before we move on? Hearing none, we shall move on to talk about OEM disruption, and specifically a summer wrap-up. What we're going to do is just give us some time for each of us, and also any one of you in the attendees that want to chime in and join us, please do so today. Just put up your hand or say something on chat. Just an opportunity to, and I'll ask Rick to go first because I have a slide for him.
Great.
What's your wrap up for this past 12 months? It's been crazy 12 months.
It has been a crazy 12 months. And to think back to last June when we were, gosh, where was that? Tampa for Realcomm. Was
That's correct.
miserable humidity and fantastic opportunity to see everybody. But just think that was just a year ago, and where we were as with our sort of agenda with the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, and then what's happened in the past year is it's pretty amazing that we've gotten as much done, and we've kind of found ourselves in the middle of so many different interesting new technology challenges and opportunities. But I think the main thing, obviously, my opinion of what's happened for me or for us in the last 12 months is that we took the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, which was, previously uh, a smaller focus or a more narrow focus, and we've moved it into the Linux Foundation, and that's not without significant effort and or kind of significant change. And I wanted to kind of step through what some of those changes are. Because a year ago we were still talking about the coalition as a organization that was identifying technical barriers and then setting out about pulling the people together to solve some of those technical barriers. Um, and now we have a significantly broader uh, charter. But going back a year when we were focused on what were some of the technology challenges and how could we demonstrate progress to solving them, we'd focused on 2525, which just came up in terms of like creating a place for specifications. We focused on the concept of giving context to digitization, which we called TXO, so total cost of ownership, total cost of everything. Um, and we also had started talking about or had significant discussion around this IBB concept, which got a little bit of discussion here in a minute, and it's going to get more. And so we had really those three specific things, and with a kind of a narrow focus and a small group of people working on it, that was it was quite a lot, and it got a lot of attention. And one of the things that one of the groups that noticed what we were doing was the Linux Foundation, and then the conversation started about how can what we're talking about with those three or four focus areas, how could that expand to be a community driven effort to redefine an industry. And the reason we've got this graphic up on the screen is because this is sort of where we started to understand what the Linux Foundation has as an agenda. And the agenda is kind of written right here on the screen of to do to do everything possible to help drive innovation, speed, interoperability, and cost for the more rapid and the more effective deployment of software in a particular industry. Now, this graphic that's on the screen is a report that I've mentioned before. It's a 57-page report about how the Linux Foundation has hosted different projects that have affected these industries that are described on there. So, telecom, energy, automotive, finance, agriculture, and
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 I've
make
put
sure
the
I can
link
find.
in chat, by the way, Rick. I put the link
Got it.
to this.
Great, great. And so so a year ago, um, understanding what the Linux Foundation sort of how the Linux Foundation works, we agreed that um, it would be useful for this industry to get focus from this approach. And it's taken a little while for everybody, I think, get their head around the what open source means, what doesn't mean, what open standards means, doesn't mean, and then more specifically, the process of using the Linux way of convening. Um, it's different than what we were doing previous to being part of Linux. The Linux approach to community is defined by certain philosophies of how open source works and how sharing works and how contributions work, and it's just a little bit different and exciting at the same time. Then a couple of months ago, the idea of convening a group to specifically look at the harmonization or about semantics and ontologies was that idea was surfaced, and the concept of the Tiger team came up, and the idea of C4SB teaming up with NIST, so Linux and NIST coming together to say, hey, let's bring together these different experts on ontologies and semantics and seeing if there was anything that could be anything productive that could come of that. Um, I'd say was kind of culminated in the last couple of weeks, but I'd say it was a great example of how C4SB could expand its thinking about instead of just narrowly being focused on the IBB and 2525 and TXO, to be opening up to say what other things could be advanced and improved if we bring together experts under this new, community approach to participation. So you guys have heard a bunch about what had happened with the Tiger team, but the bottom line is it was seen to be successful, and that the Tiger team is now going to result in multiple different efforts of working group around ways of showing interoperability um, that have something to do or tie back to semantics and ontologies and the work that's been done by those different groups. So, I mean, it's a mouthful that I just described. I don't know how many minutes I was supposed to take, but but bottom line is going from being the old C4SB to being now C4SBF Foundation is a significant difference in how we work, a significant difference on what we're working on, and the Tiger team coming together and having such interesting outcomes was an example of I think what we're going to see going forward. Now, just to go back to the 57-page report here, that report, which we talked about a year ago, and it's obviously about 2024 it goes through different examples of how open source and open standards have been affecting those different industries. And I think it's um, worth everybody taking a look at or understanding that it's not insignificant what happens when an industry embraces open source and then comes together to work on and leverage the different innovations that happen. And we have every intent in the world of doing all the different things and hosting all the different work to be able to have this kind of effect on the buildings, the not just buildings energy definition, but buildings, the life cycle of buildings. So design, construction, operations, maintenance, everything to asset management. Tip of the cap to Mike Bordnero in the Asset Leadership Network, who's on the call. Um, we intend to have this sort of impact on all the digital aspects of designing, building, operating, and running buildings throughout their life cycle. So anyway, that's what did I take? 5 minutes, 7? I can't
That's
tell.
good. Any questions for Rick from the panel? I guess that's a no. All right, let us proceed then. I think I'll go next. I kind of want to talk about IBB. I'll go next, and then I'll fill the slides, and then we can open it up for conversations. It's been a pretty incredible year for me, and a lot of that has sort of shown itself really in the evolution of what IBB is. And I want to spend just a couple of minutes just sort of describing that change. If you recall, about 2 years ago, we started the IBB project, and really what we started with is this thing here that we now call the IBB host. It's this box, the idea of the box that sits in the building that is also connected to the cloud. So it becomes a cloud native box that's actually in the building. It makes the building cloud native, and into that box you can install containerized applications. So that's really where we started. And we showed an early prototype of that in Chicago, AHR, and then subsequently evolutions of that. And as we were doing that, it became clear to all of us working in the IBB project that while that is definitely a key thing that needed to be done to get over that barrier of the sort of the boundary between the building and the cloud, although that's really important, the thing that was happening there also needed to happen in other places. The sort of the interoperability and the sort of the behavior, the cloud nativeness needed to behave in other places. And those two other places are that there's an obvious need for that kind of behavior of IBB up in the cloud, where different things gets done in comparison to what happens in the host. And so we started to do quite a lot of work that involved the cloud, right? And then there's another thread of work over the couple of years that sort of said that, okay, this IBB is great, but there's another need for another type of device all the way at the edge to actually connect to the I/O or connect to wherever, very, very close to the I/O. So we started calling that the IBB Edge. So there was this sort of need of doing the thing in the middle, but also doing thing in the cloud and doing thing in the edge, right? And as we evolved this, we obviously evolved and started to build more stuff in the IBB. It sort of made us think that this is really not just about the box that is the gateway between the cloud and the building itself, but it's actually about the system that includes that box. That box is a critical part because it makes the building cloud native, but the box is just the starting point, because you really have to stretch that up to the cloud and stretch that down to the IBB edge, right? So when you start to think about it that way, you're starting to think about the fact that it's now more of a system than just a discrete item. So one of the sort of things that we've done is to change the thinking of it, to think about it as an IBB system that does this. So obviously, the IBB edge can be in various places, and there's sort of different sort of arrangements that can be made depending on the use cases. And obviously, the IBB enterprise, the one in the cloud, have all sorts of different sort of permutations for different use cases. In all cases, the concept of an IBB app, which is an app that understands the IBB architecture, can actually behave the way it's supposed to, can then work either in the host or in the edge or in the enterprise. It'll be the same app that can actually do all of that. So that's kind of the subtle but quite significant shift in thinking over the past 6 to 9 months after all the experience that we've had. And as a consequence of that, we put together a paper, which we called it the IBB system. And I am going to put that a link to that in chat. It's a pretty long document. It's about 16 pages, but it actually describes all of the different types, all of the different type of components that makes up an IBB, an enterprise, a host, an edge, and the app itself. And it goes to some level of detail in terms of what those things and how they differ from each other. The one thing I want to mention, I'm going to ask Rick to sort of comment on this, is that this is an aspirational document. Right? This is really talking about a vision of what a system should be or could be implemented for buildings to be smart, that is highly secure, that is highly interoperable, that actually does all of the things we've been talking about in terms of breaking down silos. Right? So this is obviously going to take some time to evolve and to get mature and to be deployed. And one of the parts of the project that we're actually embarking on now is sort of a way to think about the maturity model of products and solutions in comparison to the IBB system sort of vision. So that's sort of working ongoing, because not everybody's going to get straight there, because it's actually quite a lot of work to get there. But it's the vision and the idea that the system is possible to do. So do you want to add to that, Rick?
Yeah, as I mentioned about the original work of Coalition for Smarter Buildings included this vision of this IBB as a way to change the expectations of how systems could work in buildings, and whether it's the hardware part of the system that you're focused on, the physical layers, or the data layers, or the application layers, the IBB sort of put out a sort of a challenge for redefining all the different ways that systems could affect a building, and how it could describe, a move towards being more cloud native. And cloud native is not just a buzzword, not just it's a real IT principle that the world is moving to. And so it's a aspirational design, aspirational system architecture that is, I don't know, putting a little bit of pressure on other folks in the industry to say, how do they address security? How do they address the physical layer abstraction? How do we raise the bar on the industry and set sort of a new standard of, this is how you have to be able to answer these questions, and this is a um, so yeah, it's a little bit aspirational. It's a little bit of an effort to raise the bar and kind of push the envelope. Um, and in the meantime, like Anto said, there's already pieces of this that are ready to be shown and ready to be deployed and bought or sold. Um, and with the complying with the intent of cloud nativity, or the CNCF part of the Linux Foundation, it's a really it's a really it's a really important aspirational statement of how we're going to make our industry, or how we can make our industry more compliant with the expectations of the new generation of not just cloud native, but also the new expectations of AI, the new expectations of interoperability, the new expectations of no vendor lock-in. I mean, it's a so in some ways it's a architecture diagram. In some ways it's an aspirational challenge to the industry, and I hope everybody understands the positioning of that.
Thanks, Rick. So that's for me, that's been the sort of the enormous change over the past 12 months, and glad that I can share it with you guys. Any questions on that? Then we can move on. Okay, hearing no questions, I'm going to stop the share and give an opportunity, maybe Steve or Tracy or Keith or David or Ken want to take the mic.
Great. So I guess my starting point is, what problem are we trying to solve? Okay. And because we've had an awful lot of discussion over the last year devoted to the fundamental issue of how do we interoperate across all the OT domains. Okay. So within a domain, where all of us are familiar with, if you will, the efforts of, say, BACnet to try to get everybody to share data on a common protocol. Okay. But clearly that isn't the answer for all the other domains, right? Maybe in some instances, but to think that that's going to be the answer across all domains is not realistic. So, not to mention, particularly with regard to things that are outside of control specifically. So back-end systems, like real estate management systems, asset management systems, things of that sort. And so we've been, for a year now, been looking at how to attack this fundamental problem. And the work that's been done and the journey that we've witnessed, particularly with what Rick was talking about with C4SB and the involvement of the Linux Foundation, has really lent, I think, a lot of credibility to this effort, which is great. And then further, I think in large part because of that, we've been able to attract some critical mass of voices, and we euphemistically call them the Tiger Team, who share in our objective here, and have had very meaningful conversations around, okay, what do we actually need to do to address this challenge? And so, so from my perspective, I'm very encouraged by this, where we are now on this journey. Still very much work to be done. We haven't necessarily talked about our recent conversations around artificial intelligence, AI, and how that plays into this whole opportunity or need, I've got to put it that way. But we certainly have had conversations on Monday Live about it. And but the point is, I feel like we've made an awful lot of progress. We've expanded the circle of people who are skilled and understand the issues and are engaging across the board in addressing this issue. So from my perspective, I think we have a lot to be happy about in terms of where we stand today. So we're not done, but we've got, like I said, a critical mass and a skilled group of people who are determined to, if you will, and I think it was Anto or Rick who talked about raising the bar. I do feel that's effectively what we've done, is we've raised the bar, around this conversation and pointed out all of the key issues that need to be addressed by this emerging solution. And now it's about polishing it up and then driving adoption across our industry. And then I think we've really accomplished what we set out to accomplish. So by no means is the work over, but I think we've got a lot to be appreciative of for how far we've taken it. And now let's just keep going and get something that we can share openly with the public as to steps that are going to be the next steps in this evolution.
That's great. As is mentioned quite often in the Tiger team and other sort of C4SB work, C4SB calls these days, it's now time to get some work done.
Right. Yep.
And a lot of work has been done, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop here.
Right. Correct.
Keith, you unmuted. Presumably that's a signal that you're ready to go.
Yes.
Off you go.
All right. So one thing I'm seeing more and more of is, we've gone a long way in just 6 months to where 6 months ago it was like, you're not going to connect my building to the cloud. And now 6 months later, what are you talking about? I'm not going to connect to the cloud. So we started doing a lot more walking away from unreasonable engagements. So yeah, we have the first meeting and it's like, well, their IT says you're not gonna be able to connect to our cloud, or we're not gonna go to your cloud, you have to do it on-prem. We part ways as friends. So we just don't have time to, wait. Like everybody's going on the cloud. The US government's on the cloud. Banking is all on the cloud. Everybody's on the cloud. This Zoom call is hosted from the cloud. So we're not going on the cloud. We're not going to change our business model. So I see a kind of, especially in the building controls industry, we're redefining and re-educating people as to what was always normal to the rest of the world. So we don't even talk about our install process anymore. There's no install process. We'll take care of that for you. Nobody lays out a project plan to install a Zoom plugin. And so it was this easy, and it should have been this easy all along. So I just see a huge adoption. It's almost like, I guess, ChatGPT and more of the modern cloud engagement. Like everybody's on the cloud. Everything's on the cloud. So we no longer have to fight. We're no longer willing to fight that battle anymore, or have that discussion, because it just wastes time. So I found a tremendous amount of just engagement recently. We're installing, several customers at this point in time. And so now IT departments, they're conforming to the business value that we're presenting to the people that control the budgets and stuff. And so IT finally is kind of working for us. So there is no coming to them, holding our hat in our hand and begging them, please let us on your network. No, none of that. They're facilitating. I just got out the blue from a college that I'm going to install our agent at a central plant tomorrow at a local university, and their IT department said, oh, here's the encrypted login for your remote connectivity, and I didn't even ask them for it. Like usually that's like pulling teeth, right? Like they're not going to give you a VPN client. Oh my God! And I didn't even ask for it. It's like standard. It's a standard engagement for any third-party vendor. Like, here's our secure method to access your server that they spun up for us. It's a vehicle for us to install our software. So I'm just thoroughly relieved that it seems like we're moving past that. We're not there yet, but we're moving past that. This dysfunctionality, I think.
Yeah, that's a huge deal, and you're right, because a year ago, or obviously 2 years ago, you mentioned the word cloud at a HR session, and you almost get eggs thrown at you.
Oh yeah, stone. I mean, yeah, there's this. I've never even seen this platform. It's called Imprivata, and it's vendor privilege access management. Like we figured this stuff out. There's a secure way to give vendors access, third-party vendors like me, access to your IT. It's because that prevents anybody from trying to do a workaround with a rogue hub somewhere on the network or a non-managed interface. So, I mean, I just see that like the sanity is just kind of returning to the world, at least our world. It was always like this for everybody else. To us, it's new.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I want to ask about that conference call for the planning the Zoom plugin. I thought we had to do that. Kidding. I think I think that the your Zoom example is maybe one of the better ones because yeah, how in the world did organizations convince IT to allow that to happen?
Yeah, there was no, we're not going to allow it. Like you're going to lose your job because we're not going to make any money.
I think
Interestingly,
that
though, some people, some companies, I've been on calls lately, don't allow recording, don't allow cameras, don't certainly don't allow AI transcript or anything like that. So still a ways to go, even though we've made great progress, I
Yeah.
think.
Tracy, why don't you, since you have the mic, why don't you take the floor?
Sure, sure. I don't know if I have much to add to what everyone has already said. When I was thinking about, this whole year, to me, it's interesting that we now have a lot of pieces on the board that are all being moved along and moved forward. It kind of reminded me of one of those little mindless games you play on your phone where you have to unscramble all the cars and get them all going in the same direction and in order to accomplish your goal. It feels a lot like that, even to just listen to you guys. We've got this piece of the puzzle and we've got that piece of the puzzle, and that enables this over here. And Steve reminds us, let's keep our eye on the goal. Where are we going with this whole thing, and what's really important? So all of these things that have been happening this year, IBB and C4SB and AI and the Semantic Tiger team, all bring me back to one thing personally, which is, since the early 90s, even my day job has been about interoperability and creating interoperability. And it when this whole thing started several years ago, when we kind of get talking about this again, it was interesting that it's like bell bottoms. It's back in fashion again to talk about interoperability, and I'm very happy about that. That the fact that the vision that a lot of us have had literally for 30 plus years is still valid and revalidated now and becoming higher from a priority standpoint, I think, for the industry. So to me, I am very happy that all of these activities have been going on this year. And coming up next year, I hope we can drive things a little bit further. It's 2 steps forward and 1 back on some of these, but I'm confident that we're still in the mode where we're gaining momentum and we're going to hit critical mass at some point in time to where, a few years from now, we're going to remember this call and say, remember a few years back when none of this was real? So I'm happy about that. And looking forward to see what the next year brings here and moving all this forward.
Does that next year mean that we're all going to wear bell bottoms then?
Yeah, maybe black t-shirts.
Yeah.
Black t-shirts and
Yeah,
colorful black.
heads. Yeah. That's
All right.
funny.
Great. David?
Hi everyone.
There you go.
I was eating lunch, so I apologize for not having my camera on. One of the things that I wanted to share is I'm working as a developer now. And so all of the lessons learned over the last 20 years, trying to convince owners to do the right thing, whether owners or developers, now I have the opportunity to implement a lot of what I've learned and seeing how it actually plays out. And one of the things that I'm painfully aware of is first, for this to really work through ground up construction all the way through operations, it has to be in the agreement documents with the architects, the engineers, the GCs, and the subs. And all of this needs to be done to prepare operations to hit the ground running. And I think the work that we're doing here in this group is helping to hone what those requirements should be and what everyone really needs to be keeping their focus on in order to have an interoperable building that meets all of these requirements. And Kimon, I completely agree with governance. That's a great point. And this comes down to the agreement document. So I wanted to emphasize that in the year ahead, we need to focus on how does this get baked in? How does it get baked in when there's a new project? How does this get baked in when an organization is appointed to do this work? We need to focus on how this is implemented and what the agreement verbiage is. The other thing that I thought that's important to share is it's probably the most difficult time to build ground up construction since World War II, except for data centers, perhaps. But trying to build housing right now and trying to, there no office buildings will be built for many years at this point. But in order to build anything, capital is required from equity investors and lenders. And right now, equity investor expectations are too high and debt is too high at an interest rate. So this means the construction industry is being crippled. 10 years ago, there were 60 cranes, over 60 cranes in the air in Chicago. Now there are less than 6. And so if we want to see the next generation of buildings, either updating existing buildings or new buildings, what's fundamental to making any of it happen is having the capital to do it. And so in this coming year, I really also think we should focus on what's the benefit for capital to do this and where is the capital coming from? Because we need to understand the return on investment angle much better than I think we do now. And so I would encourage all of us to bring in more institutional clients and owners and REITs, anyone and everyone we can bring into this group who has a significant portfolio or even a small portfolio. We need real world stories and real world anecdotes and real world results. And I think that with the path we're on, especially with the joining forces with the Linux Foundation, we're on a good path to do these things, but it really needs to focus on what is that operational model going to be, and what is the financial benefit to implementing all of this. Thank you.
Good.
Very good.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Good stuff. I'm going to ask Ken, and we may have some time after Ken. If anybody on the attendees want to chime in, just put your hand up, please, and I'll bring you on. But Ken, over to you. What's been your highlight?
Well, I think the big thing is the conversation is just getting larger and it's growing in every direction. For us as the curator of your thoughts, I guess, and taking them to the industry and taking them to the cloud, we're seeing a lot more interaction globally. People are very interested in what we're doing. And then in addition to the physical growth, there's a whole bunch of folks, as we kind of simplified it, is what we're really talking about is the exchange of data and getting it out of the silos And it turns out we're not the only people in the world that have that problem. And so we're starting to get whole industries that are actually taking interest in what it is we're doing. And it's just a growth that I hadn't imagined. I hadn't really seen automated buildings as sort of insular as it was. It just talked about the control systems. And as we start to move into these areas, we're starting to touch a bunch of people that are interested in what we're doing and they see the value. And we're also seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions that are surprising almost everybody. We're starting to see people, the major players starting to think that, gosh, we've got to have a piece of this because that's cardinal. And then I think the other discussion that we started was with the OEMs to put pressure on the equipment people to start having some listening to what we're talking about, because their products are going to come online and they're going to arrive on site and they need to fall into some of the stuff we're working or all of the stuff we're working on. So I think we're making a lot of noise. We're reaching out to a lot of people. It's a good time to be in the business of selling newspapers.
Great. Thank you, Ken. So let's just open up the floor for all of these thoughts that we all shared. Oh, Kimon wants to come and join us. So I'm going to bring him on.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah. Hey, Kimon.
How are you doing? Yeah, just launching off with some things that I heard. For example, what Keith said about nobody wanting to go to the cloud now. Now everyone's ready for it. I think the industry, and even from the BIM side, we've all been so used to thinking in terms of that silo that we live in. And Anto, I think the diagram that you have of the lightweight connections to silos is really critical to all this. But I'm finding still there's confusion even in the ASHRAE world. When I was there, there was concept of we need to put everything into the BIM, or we need to get everything into that same silo. So it's kind of this mentality still there. But the more that we can message that and get the owners and the governance side asking for it, I think that's the big challenge, is to get them to the owners to understand that they're going to be managing their buildings, building less buildings, like we talked about earlier, but managing their existing infrastructure to really understand that basic concept that even the people in the industry don't yet understand. We're been so conditioned to thinking in terms of we need to put everything into the BIM or everything into on-prem or whatever. So that shift, I think, is going to be an important one. That's just my observation.
But I think what's sort of interesting is that a year or two ago, maybe some of the people on this call were in the same position. We weren't as clear about things, right? So it's just where we are in the maturity of all of these concepts that are sort of impacting our world. Is that the way to look at it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I think going back to kind of conversations I had at ASHRAE, it's almost like we're living in our silos, so we're seeing it from that perspective. We're thinking that there's no way that you can get everything that I know to connect in your silo and then you to actually absorb everything that I do, which is not the right concept anyway. And I keep hearing that pattern, even from very technical people. In fact, I had a few interviews specifically about this, and I was trying to figure out what that angle is. And it's really that we've been baked into that idea for so long that it's difficult to even think outside of it, even when we start talking the very technical aspects. And I think the Tiger team is starting to break that apart. And I think if we can keep that momentum going and actually show some use cases, well, here's some examples, but it's difficult to describe. Therefore, if we had something concrete to point to and say, well, here's how it actually works, I think then maybe we can get it going. And having the owners now asking for it, because the C-suite, as we've seen, is starting to demand, well, we need to start using AI. Well, if you use AI, you need to be in the cloud and you need to be able to connect. Well, that immediately is an opportunity, I think, for us to say, well, and here's how you do it.
Right. Actually, kudos to you, Kimon, to going out to all of these conventions, and you not only participate as speaker but interviewing the folks and getting all of those pieces, getting their ideas back. That's very valuable. You are definitely one of our best missionaries in the industry right now, just spreading the word and asking questions and trying to better understand their requirements, as I mentioned.
And learning. Actually, I've learned more than that's what I've been doing. I've been absorbing, and I think we need to ask the why. We need to be in that mode of we need to learn from the next silo. I guess that's where we are too. I think it's not only kind of projecting what we know out, but absorbing what else is there, and then trying to find those lightweight
Yeah,
connections.
yeah. The interview sort of conversations that you have with seemingly strangers are always very interesting because they're sort of a perspective that we don't typically see, right? Because
Yeah,
we have a certain perspective. So whatever questions I ask will be from that perspective. It's difficult to step outside of that, and sort of seeing that is really, really, really great.
thanks.
I think the other thing too is Kimon is coming from a different angle. And so it's not like Anto asking that question or Rick. It's basically somebody who's attempting to try and use some of this stuff, and so that's really good. But yeah, the feedback, I'm always surprised as to what the people he's interviewing say. There's often a twist in there I never even saw.
Thanks.
That's great.
I wanted to go back to something that David said that I think is going to be critical for us to focus on here for the next several years, likely. And that is the fact that there's going to be a significant reduction, or is a significant reduction in new construction, which leads us to needing to focus on retrofitting applications and making that happen. We haven't necessarily had that as a focus of some of our conversation, or much of our conversation, but I think coming up with or focusing and providing solutions for retrofitting applications is going to be critical to get all of this moving forward, actually. So something to think about here as we go into the last half of the year.
Yeah, the world is broken and retrofit is a solution. So I think
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. In all
It's
my
our
life,
reality.
retrofit.
Yeah.
I
And
do.
I think we have to be careful in our positioning that we make sure to educate people the things we're talking about do apply to retrofit situations. See, it doesn't have to be a new commercial office building, right?
So I do have a question for David, if you're still there. If you can come away from your lunch for a moment. Is there a sort of a time element? Thank you. Is there a time element to what you were saying? In other words, things in financial world tend to go in cycles. So do you think you were talking about a cycle, but then there's another part of the cycle, which obviously something else. You see that side of things?
So there's definitely a cycle, and I unfortunately am seeing the pattern actually closer to what people were talking about when COVID started, with a doom loop for commercial business districts where there aren't enough people in the offices, so the retail at ground level can't thrive, and then both collapse, and thus less property and sales tax for the city. The city can't provide services, and it just is this downward spiral or doom loop. I actually see construction being in that situation now, where we're simply not building enough to retain our institutional knowledge about how to build. And there's been staffing problems enough with the trades. It's only going to get more acute. And the cost of labor will only go up, especially with the immigration challenges we're having, the tariff challenges we're having, and the supply chain challenges. All of these combined with the interest rates are compounding the difficulty to build. And, in a blue city and blue state like mine, on top of that, there's all the costs for permitting and entitlement and et cetera, et cetera. So unless well, the bottom line, in my opinion, is that we are in a crisis. And in the words of Rahm Emanuel, when he was Obama's chief of staff, never let a crisis go to waste. Take the opportunity to implement change that previously you didn't think was possible. And so I see an opportunity now to implement change that we thought was impossible just 2 years ago. And I think this is true both for implementing the way construction itself is done, but also it's changing the way facility management works, property management works, and asset management works. And it's going to be a really difficult and challenging time, especially for ground up. But in challenging times and crisis times, there's also lots of opportunity. And so I see that this crisis, I think, is only going to get worse. And it's going to be a multi-year challenging environment. And I feel, though, that there's a massive opportunity for rethinking how everything's done. And with that in mind, just like to use Illinois as an example again, well, actually any state in the union right now, with Fannie and Freddie under, massive changes, with LIHTC, which is low income housing tax credits, and LISC and other funding mechanisms being challenged and budgets cut, all of these federal programs that states relied on are now the states are going to look for new solutions to keep building. And so this could actually unleash more construction to happen as everything rebalances and adjusts. So I would just encourage everyone to discover and focus on the opportunities this situation is presenting and figure out how to respond with agility to adapt to the new conditions. Did that answer your question, Anto? Okay.
Yes. Yes, you did.
So the cycle is going to be 4 or 5 years at best, and maybe even longer, in my opinion. And changing interest rates is not going to make a difference, unfortunately.
So is this kind of Office Armageddon sort of version 2, kind of the different part of it?
Absolutely. I think it's beyond, yeah. I mean, I don't see people up in arms against this, but here's the crazy thing. At one time, we have a housing crisis and we're selling more new homes and less homes than ever. And so demand is off the hook. And yet at the same time, we can't seem to build to meet that demand. It's absurd. And we really need to think about this from an abundance standpoint, because if we can figure out how to just unshackle the real estate development part of the industry to just build and let the market forces do their thing, we can build all the housing that's needed and the cost of housing will go down, and then people will have more money for discretionary spending, and local and state and federal governments will have more income because of the property taxes. So we can grow our way into a better place. We just need, the phrase that I'm using now is, in Chicago, we can't seem to get out of our own way to help ourselves. And that's what I feel we need to change our thinking so we can get out of our own way.
Very interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
That's great words to maybe wrap up the year, or maybe wrap up the half year, or the academic year. I guess this one. So thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kimon, for joining us. This has been a great conversation. It's been a great 6 months this year. So this makes us what, five and a bit years that we've been doing Monday Live. Quite amazing. So thank you all. Thanks for the attendees for joining us. Hope you have a great week and a great summer, and we'll be back whatever it is the Monday after Labor Day. So,
Liberty.
Thank you. All right.
bye bye.
Here.
Bye all. Cheers.
There, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.